Okay, let's dive into this. It's kind of staggering when you think about it. Nearly 150 years since Thomas Edison, the light bulb. And today, there are still 700 million people on Earth without any access to electricity. 700 million. I mean, that feels like one of the biggest, well, planetary market failures of our time. For these folks, when the sun goes down, they're often stuck using fuels that are dirty, expensive, and honestly, pretty dangerous, just for a bit of light.
It is astounding. It really is. And, what strikes me immediately is that this goes so much further than just light. The lack of electricity, it has these profound impacts, right? It hits at the very core of things like resilience, human agency, basic empowerment. Just think about the contrast for a second. We have tech visionaries talking about an AI tutor for every child on the planet, but how does that even begin to compute for a child who doesn't have electricity at home? It just doesn't. And then you layer on climate change. The most vulnerable people, they're hit hardest by climate events. So electricity becomes absolutely vital for adaptation. It means communications when there are floods, irrigation when there are droughts. It even means keeping essential medicines cool during heat waves. It's fundamental.
Absolutely fundamental. It's a huge challenge, no doubt about it.
Right.
But what's really interesting, what our sources get into, is that there's actually a compelling vision for a fix. And this is where it gets fascinating. The plan requires more than just tech. Our sources talk about needing moral imagination and also a totally different way of thinking about risk. So today we're going to dig into the progress that's actually been made already, which is significant. We'll look at the challenges, the really tough ones of reaching those communities that are hardest to reach. And we'll explore a proposed solution that uses some pretty innovative financial structures, these new capital stacks. Okay, so let's start with that progress, because there has been progress. When my organization, Acumen, first started investing in off-grid power way back in 2007, the number was 1.5 billion people without access. 1.5 billion.
Wow.
Yeah. The good news, that number's been cut in half. Now, obviously, off-grid solutions aren't the only reason, but they have been a massive part of that success. We've really seen this incredible evolution in the sector. It started simple, just basic lights.
That's what's so powerful, isn't it? That starting point. From just one light bulb, this whole idea of the adjacent possible it exploded. Suddenly you had an entire ecosystem of services building on that first step. So home systems came next, right? With radios, maybe cell phone chargers, then solar TVs, cook stoves, even solar irrigation, refrigeration. Now we're seeing things like e-mobility. You can actually see thousands of electric motorbikes on the streets in places like Kenya, Rwanda. It's this incredibly rapid sort of self-generating wave of innovation.
Something that really struck me when I was reading through the material was the story about Susan, one of the people, impacted by this. She talked about how she used to live in deep fear every single night. That just hit me. Fear of bandits or wild animals or even getting bitten by a snake going to the outdoor toilet in the dark. And now, with light, she says she doesn't feel stressed. Her kids have more connection. They even finished a course on their solar TV to learn sign language so they could finally talk to their deaf cousins. I mean, it's not just about light, is it? It's about basic human dignity, safety.
It really is. It's fundamental. And that ripple effect, it just keeps going. So, okay, beyond the safety, the connection, what about the economics? What are the tangible benefits we're seeing from these off-grid solutions? Well, the average family that gets off-grid solar, they can cut their energy spending by over 50%. That's huge.
Wow, 50%.
Yeah. And the sector itself has created, I think the number is over 370,000 good jobs already.
Yeah.
And the trajectory is still upward. We're actually on track to reach another 300 million people by 2030.
That progress is remarkable, truly. But, okay, it does make you ask, who are these, remaining hundreds of millions, the ones still left? And what makes reaching them so much harder than the first, say, 700 million who got access?
Right.
Looking at places like Burundi, you mentioned, maybe 11% electrification, Malawi, 16%, Chad, only 12%. These aren't just numbers on a page. These are real people, often just dismissed as, too poor, too risky, too hard.
Exactly. And yet, if we genuinely believe that all human beings deserve dignity, and if we understand, really grasp, that climate change hits the most vulnerable the hardest, then these are precisely the people we have to focus on now. Because, like you said earlier, electricity isn't just about having a light bulb. It's the key to communications during floods, it's irrigation during droughts, it's keeping medicines viable during heat waves, during pandemics. It's about empowering hospitals, schools, local businesses, so that these isolated communities, which are often already fragile, can actually build some resilience in this, increasingly volatile world.
And there's a really crucial point here, too, about climate change mitigation, not just adaptation. That's equally urgent because right now, the entire African continent contributes what, about 3.5% of total global emissions. It's tiny. And the average African uses something like 1/15 the energy of an average American.
Precisely. It's not about current emissions so much as future emissions. Al Gore made this point very powerfully. The population on the continent is projected to grow massively, from 1.5 billion now to maybe 2.5 billion by 2050.
Huge growth.
So the critical question is, what kind of energy is going to fuel that growth? And what we've learned, crucially, from investing in off-grid solar is that once families get onto that first rung of the solar energy ladder, they don't go back to kerosene or candles. And that is fantastic news. It's good for the planet, and it's obviously good for people. Just as an example, if you brought basic electricity to just 10 million families, you'd avoid over 27 million tons of carbon emissions. And you'd create something like $10 billion in direct economic benefits. Now, multiply that out. That's real transformation.
So, okay, let's recap. The demand is clearly there. The technology, it's available, it works. The companies, they're ready, they're innovating. But the capital isn't flowing, not at the scale that's needed. And one thing we know for sure, money itself cannot be the constraint. Because, I mean, look at last year. The world allocated $2 trillion to shifting industry away from fossil fuels towards cleaner energy. $2 trillion.
It's just, yeah, the contrast is jarring when you see those numbers side by side. Out of that $2 trillion, less than 800 million went to off-grid solar.
Less than 800 million.
Yes, that's less than 0.1%. It honestly makes no sense. The source material puts it very bluntly. Climate finance isn't scarce, it's scared.
Yeah, it's good. And okay, you can understand some hesitation, right? We're talking about customers earning maybe a few dollars a day. You've got serious macroeconomic headwinds, inflation, currency depreciation hitting these markets hard. Plus, inequality, lack of jobs, sometimes uncertain leadership. That 0.1% figure is just shocking.
Yeah.
But is there, I mean, beyond just being scared, are there real arguments? Legitimate financial mechanisms or risk models that currently block that capital flow? Because if we only focus on those narratives, the problems, the risks, we miss the much bigger story, right? The narrative of opportunity. Electricity is foundational. We keep saying it, but it's true, and we can solve this. But it absolutely requires the right kind of capital to unlock these new energy markets, especially now in what some call the post-aid era. My organization has been working on this directly with an initiative called Hardest to Reach. It tries to tackle this head-on.
Right, and this initiative, it's essentially creating a multi-layered capital structure, a stack, they call it. It blends different kinds of money: philanthropy, impact investing, funds from development finance institutions, even a commercial bank is involved. It starts with, I think, $60 million in philanthropic funding, and that allows for that really early stage patient investment, investing in companies working in the absolute toughest markets.
Patient and flexible.
Exactly. Philanthropy lets you move fast, sure, but the crucial thing is it de-risks those initial ventures. It makes it safer for the next layers of capital, the larger amounts, to come in later. So far, they've put about $12 million into 8 companies in places like Sierra Leone, Benin, Malawi, DRC, Somalia. Really tough environments.
And working right alongside that philanthropic piece, there's a debt facility. It's impact-aligned, anchored with funding from the Green Climate Fund and others. And that structure allows them to pull in even more institutional capital from further up the chain, including Shinhan, which is the largest commercial bank in Korea. I mean, this whole initiative, it's managed to bring together 21 different players across that entire capital continuum, from grants all the way to impact investing to commercial finance, all focused on providing $250 million in financing to Africa's most challenging energy markets.
And look, making that happen wasn't easy. Let's be clear. It relied heavily on leadership, on courage, frankly, and competence from people within those big institutions, too. But that is precisely the kind of moral imagination that's required. We have to rethink how we approach investing. It's just not acceptable, really, to let financial risk be the only deciding factor, have the final word. Yes, we can be smart, we can be careful, we can structure things to mitigate financial risk, but there's an equally important question, maybe more important. What is the risk of not daring? What's the actual cost of leaving hundreds of millions of people in the dark, watching instability rise, emissions rise, migration potentially rise? It means cutting off human potential on a massive scale, cutting off possibility, creativity.
That really shifts the frame, doesn't it? Completely. It means risk isn't just dollars and cents on a spreadsheet. It's environmental risk. It's social risk. And yes, it is absolutely a moral risk. A moral concept. We know how to structure the capital. We've just seen an example. But it requires everyone involved to shift their mindset, to move from asking, what's the highest financial return I can get, to asking, okay, what is the actual problem we are trying to solve here? What kind of capital is needed to solve it? And where can I, or my institution, play a constructive role? And, if you just put on a long-term investor hat for a moment, think about hundreds of millions of new electricity consumers. They're going to need new appliances, new services, new innovations. Entirely new markets are going to emerge from this. We know this is true because we've already seen it happen on a smaller scale.
Yes, and that fundamentally is a key message for anyone tracking global development or climate action. Electricity is foundational for human dignity, for resilience. It's absolutely essential if we want isolated communities to build stability in what is undeniably an increasingly volatile climate. And that core message from the source material just rings so true. Climate finance isn't scarce, it's scared. That statistic we talked about, less than 0.1% of that massive $2 trillion in global transition finance last year went to off-grid solar. It just hammers home the point. It forces us to see risk not just financially, but environmentally, socially, and yes, critically, morally.
Looking back through history, you don't get that many chances to do something this big, something this important and yet this difficult. Bringing electricity to every single person on the planet. I sometimes ask myself, and maybe, invite you listening to think about this too. 100 years from now, what will that future generation say about us, about our time? Will they look back and gasp, in astonishment and say, wow, they were the ones. They finally did it. They brought electricity and possibility and dignity to everyone. Or will they just wonder how we could have possibly averted our eyes? How could we have left hundreds of millions of people behind in the dark? There's that beautiful line from the poet Hafez. He wrote, even after all these years, the sun never says to the earth, you owe me. Look what happens with a love like that. It lights the whole sky. Maybe that can inspire us a little to think about the incredible power of a truly generous collective effort.